But we got the deadline coming up, so there's a lot to talk about still. I mean, some new stuff, some stuff to be kind of redundant about. But first of all, it's interesting. As we noted, Richaun Holmes, he got a double-double when he started for Domantas Sabonis. He played really well. Metu has his injury against... Was that against...
That was against Philadelphia.
And Holmes comes in for second half relief of Sabonis, plays pretty well. And Holmes played very nicely against the Grizzlies in terms of rebounding and energy. He was terrific. And Marc Stein reported, I think Monday or Tuesday, that other teams are kind of looking at Holmes as a potential buyout candidate, which is essentially to say that they either think his contract's too high or that the Kings' asking price is too high and that they're not going to be able to trade him. And now that doesn't necessarily mean that the Kings are actually thinking about doing that. Because if the Kings can't trade him, if they're not able to make a move that involves Holmes, it kind of feels safe to say that would mean that they didn't get a deal done at the backup five, at least. So what would they stand to gain by doing a buyout with Richaun Holmes? Right? I mean...
Yeah, nothing. You don't buy out Holmes. I don't know why. I mean, I get it. Maybe, save cap space for the offseason.
Well, I don't even think that affects the cap. I think the money would still go towards the cap in some way. I think with this, if I read that correctly.
Oh, well then
they'd just save money in terms of like they wouldn't have to pay. Like they just save, the organization would save cash.
Yeah, well then I guess the only person to gain out of that would be Vivek, right? So I mean I don't see this as a realistic move regardless. Like you said, if you don't trade Holmes, it's because there is no suitor for him, at least, giving a reasonable offer. I mean, if someone offered you 2 second rounders for Holmes, would you trade him? But again, okay, wait, before I even ask that, because it is very dependent on if you have a backup center. Because
that's an important piece that I did not really mention. Because right now, I don't know how long Metu's going to be out. It's a bone bruise.
He was questionable for Memphis, so I mean, maybe. He's questionable. I mean, maybe a week tops, you would think. I mean, he's not out. So you think he missed maybe a game or two? Maybe come back?
And he might not even come back and play well.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, he was playing pretty well before he got hurt. Now, of course, I still think that they should try to get an upgrade there, but this is all under the scenario that they can't. And so you might very well need Holmes. And just based off his last 3 appearances, he's played well. And it's like, we've said this before. So you don't want to get ahead of yourself, but also really interesting after the Laker game, Mike Brown said the guy's been dealing with stuff that you wouldn't wish upon anybody off the court, which is making mention of his debacle at the end of last season. And it was the first time, to my knowledge, it was the first time that anybody really mentioned off the court matters for Holmes, out of the organization. Holmes himself said ahead of training camp that everything was behind him. As expected, it's just like you don't expect athletes to tell 100% of the truth, especially when it comes to their personal lives. Like, what do you expect him to say there? So it was always a possibility that could have been lingering, but it never really got brought up. And it just kind of, well, I guess that's behind him. And then Mike Brown mentioned that, and it's just like, well, if he's been going on with that, then there's still a ton of hope that he can tie things together. I mean, it never seemed like he didn't want to figure it out. I mean, he was so pumped after the Laker game. There's so much, he was so invigorated. It just seemed like he needed something like that. And I don't know, since that game, he's played pretty decently. And again, it's a game and a half essentially since that start that he's played as of now. But like we're kind of saying on this buyout topic, it's like the Kings might need him. And if he plays like this, he has some pretty good defensive moments. He got a block where he kind of went straight up. It kind of looked like he could have been called for a foul, but it just seemed like he got the ball more than anything. But his defense is coming around. Like things just seem like they're a little better, and it just, I mean, you hate to just leave it at like, man, that'd be a shot in the arm. Wouldn't that be great? But it would be.
It would be. I still don't know how to feel about Holmes. I'm less likely to get excited over the idea that he can be that backup center we would hope, or we were hoping he'd be coming into the season. That's because he's had the job twice and he's lost it twice now, right? Regardless of off-court matters or not. And yeah, he had a big game against the Lakers as a starter. Have to, he was a starter in that situation. He has not really looked good off the bench. I mean, he always looked good as a starter, hence why he got that contract, right? I mean, you hope he can turn it around, but again, at the same time, you can't trade him. You can't leave Metu and Lin as your only backups. If the Kings, make the playoffs, which it looks like they probably will at this rate. So if you can get a backup center and you're able to trade Holmes, I think that's the right move. But mostly for the contract and the way he's been playing, of course. Like you hope he can get out of it and maybe you can get back to it next year. I mean, who's to say? But you can also cut $11 million off the books if you trade him. So yeah, it's just really dependent on that backup center. If you can grab maybe a Mason Plumlee, maybe a Nerlens Noel, I don't know.
You bring up a good point there because that's kind of getting away from the buyout talk. Just looking at that LA start, that was a hell of an advertisement. We always kind of knew, like that was the big narrative coming in, which made it so great that he was going to be the backup. It's like you have two starting caliber centers. But then it ended up being you just have an MVP candidate and someone that doesn't want to be a backup, or doesn't not. It's not that he doesn't want to be a backup. It's just maybe it's a rhythm thing. Take the last game and a half out of it. He's been terrible as a backup. You make a great point, but the hell of an advertisement in terms of being able to trade him. And that again, like we mentioned about the buyout talk, that's almost like. It just seems like one of those rumors that comes out to kind of try to like whittle down the value maybe.
Yeah.
It just seems like almost hearing that you're almost prone to think like, oh, there are chatterings going on about Holmes. They're talking about Holmes. People want Holmes. And I don't know. It's interesting. It almost seems like you could definitely look at it and say that things are going down that path. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting things to look at here, but I don't think that the Kings are going to come to an agreement with Holmes to buy out his contract.
No, I think that's the less likely thing. I think the most likely thing is that they're going to keep him. I didn't know if they can get a backup center, and then if you can't get a backup center, you got to keep Holmes, right? But so then the trade would be the second, and then buying out. I mean, that just should be so low. It doesn't benefit the Kings whatsoever. Just might as well keep him at that point.
But if you could move the $11 million, I mean, hell, that's an interesting situation all of a sudden. If you do have a backup center coming in as well, that's maybe less expensive. You got a little bit of money to work with because the possibility that this team makes one or two trades it's there.